So our mission today is simple. We're going straight to Machiavelli himself, but we'll dig into his words, pull out the core ideas, maybe some surprising bits you didn't know, and those timeless, sometimes uncomfortable truths about governing. No filter.
Okay, let's start with the man himself, Niccolo Machiavelli. Who was he, and what drove him, this Florentine civil servant, to write such a controversial and frankly infamous guide for rulers?
Well, he was born in Florence, 1469, came from a pretty old noble family, though not rolling in cash or anything. And his whole life played out against this backdrop of just constant political chaos in Florence. It was a real pressure cooker. He saw the Medici rise under Lorenzo the Magnificent, saw them get kicked out in 94, then he actually served the Republic that followed. High-level stuff, diplomacy, until the Medici came storming back in 1512, and that was it for his career. So this wasn't theory for him, he lived it. The backstabbing, the shifting alliances, the brutality of power changing hands in Renaissance Italy.
That's a really important point, isn't it? He wasn't some academic tucked away somewhere dreaming up ideal scenarios. He was right there in the thick of it, a practitioner. And it was that direct, hands-on experience, especially after he lost his job, that really shaped the prince, right?
Oh, absolutely. When the Medici came back, Machiavelli wasn't just fired. He got caught up unfairly in a plot against them. He was thrown in prison, even tortured. Pretty brutal stuff. That definitely leaves a mark on how you see the world. After they let him go, he had to retreat to his little farm outside Florence, San Casciano, basically forced exile from the political life he knew.
And it's there, in that isolation, kind of stewing in resentment maybe, but also reflecting, that the prince starts to form. It feels less like abstract philosophy and more like, I don't know, a practical memo, almost a pitch based on hard-won experience.
Exactly. There's this amazing letter he wrote to his friend, Francesco Vittori, late 1513. He describes his evenings. He'd take off his muddy farm clothes, put on his old court robes, and step into his study, into the ancient courts of the men of old. He'd talk with them, he said, ask them why they did what they did, and he felt they answered him kindly. It was this mix, his long experience in contemporary affairs and his continual study of antiquity, that poured into the prince. He wanted to offer a shortcut, really, a practical guide for a new prince. He first aimed it at Giuliano de' Medici, then later Lorenzo.
Wow, that image. This exiled politician, putting on his best clothes to talk to ghosts of the past in his study. It's like he was trying to boil down centuries of tough lessons into something, well, usable, a manual for power.
He really was. And he wasn't subtle about the need for practicality. He makes this sharp comment about Savonarola, the fiery preacher who ran Florence for a while.
The bonfire of the vanities guy.
That's the one. Machiavelli calls him the perfect example of an unarmed prophet, someone with huge popular support, moral authority, but ultimately he failed miserably. Why? Because he didn't have the force, the actual muscle, to back up his words when people started doubting him. It's a blunt lesson right there. Belief isn't enough. You need arms to enforce a new order.
That's a pretty chilling statement. Sets the tone, doesn't it? He wasn't interested in making it sound nice or poetic.
Not at all. He says it right in the dedication. I have not embellished with swelling or magnificent words. He basically says, look, either the raw truth of the subject and its importance makes this acceptable or nothing will. He wanted the ideas, the stark reality of power, to hit home. It was a tool, not literature.
Okay, so with that context, let's dive into his actual arguments, the foundations of rule. He starts by talking about hereditary states versus new ones. How are they different in terms of how easy or hard they are to hold on to?
Right. He kicks off by saying hereditary states are, well, way easier. The formula is almost simple. Just stick to the old ways, the customs your ancestors set up, and be sensible when something new crops up. Basically, don't rock the boat too much.
So keep things familiar, maintain the status quo. Sounds straightforward enough.
Comparatively, yes. He uses the Duke of Ferrara as an example. The Duke held onto his state against some serious attacks, mainly because his family had been in charge for ages. The logic. A hereditary ruler has fewer reasons and less need to tick people off. This builds up a kind of natural loyalty over generations. People are used to the family. Even potentially disruptive changes get smoothed over by time, by the sheer antiquity and duration of his role. Stability breeds comfort.
That makes sense. People like what they know. But then he shifts gears, and this is where it gets dicey, right? The problems with new principalities, what makes them so tough?
Oh, they're inherently unstable. Machiavelli points out this unavoidable problem. Any new prince has to burden his new subjects. You need to quarter troops, raise taxes, impose new rules. That creates resentment right off the bat.
So people might initially welcome a change, hoping things will get better, but then they find themselves from bad to worse with all these new burdens. It's a classic trap. You annoy the people you just conquered, and you can't even fully satisfy the people who helped you get there because you owe them things that might upset everyone else.
Exactly. It's a real bind. Even if you have a powerful army, you still need the locals to at least tolerate you. He gives this brilliant, almost clinical breakdown of Louis XII of France and his repeated failures in Italy. Louis took Milan quickly, then lost it just as fast. The first time, it was because the very people who initially welcomed him got fed up with his rule, his demands. Their hopes soured really quickly.
Ah, yes, Louis XII's 5 capital errors.
Accent.
This is classic Machiavelli, isn't it? Laying out exactly where a ruler went wrong with zero sentimentality. What were those crucial mistakes?
He lists them very clearly. 1. Louis destroyed the minor powers around him. These smaller states could have been his allies, dependent on him, buffers against bigger threats. Instead, he wiped them out. 2. He made a major power stronger. Specifically, he helped Pope Alexander VI grab territory in the Romagna, significantly boosting the church's temporal power. 3. He brought another major foreign power onto the scene. He split the Kingdom of Naples with Spain, basically inviting a huge long-term rival into Italy. 4. He didn't move there himself. He didn't settle in Italy to oversee things directly, respond quickly to problems, or build personal loyalty or fear. And 5. He didn't send colonies. Colonies would have been cheaper, more loyal footholds. Instead, he used disruptive, expensive garrisons that just annoyed people.
Wow. So step by step, he weakened his own position, strengthened his rivals, and failed to secure his gains properly. It's almost a how-to guide on losing power. No wonder Machiavelli apparently told someone the French did not understand statecraft. That's pretty blunt.
Absolutely scathing. And Machiavelli directly blames France's eventual downfall in Italy on these moves, particularly empowering the church in Spain. This leads to one of his most famous, most chilling warnings. He who is the cause of another becoming powerful is ruined. It's a core principle. Don't build up your potential competitors, a lesson that still resonates way beyond 16th century Italy.
That's a really sharp insight. It applies everywhere, doesn't it? Business, politics, anywhere there's competition. Think long-term consequences, not just short-term gains.
Oh.
Okay, so once you have acquired a state, what does Machiavelli say about governing it, especially if it's culturally different?
Well, if the state speaks the same language, has similar customs, it's much easier, like Brittany or Burgundy becoming part of France. The key things are, 1, get rid of the old ruling family completely, no figureheads left for rebellion. 2, and this is crucial, don't mess with their existing laws or taxes too much. Let things settle, and pretty soon, they just become part of the whole.
Okay, straightforward enough. Eliminate the old boss, then blend in quietly. But what is totally different? Language, laws, customs. That sounds much harder.
Significantly harder, yes. He gives 3 main options, kind of in order of preference. The best, the most secure. The prince should go and live there himself, in person. He uses the example of the Ottoman Sultan in Greece. Being physically present means you spot trouble early, you can fix it before it blows up. Plus, subjects can appeal directly to you. That builds either loyalty because you're accessible, or fear because you're right there. And it stops your local officials from exploiting the place in your name.
Direct oversight, be on the ground. Makes sense. But what if the prince just can't relocate? What's plan B?
Plan B, and still very effective according to Machiavelli, is sending colonies. Set up settlements of your own people in 1 or 2 key spots. These act like keys to the territory. They're cheap compared to keeping an army there. And the beauty is, they only really upset the few people whose land you take for the colonists. Those people become poor and scattered, totally unable to cause trouble everyone else. They see what happened to the unlucky few. They haven't been harmed themselves, so they tend to keep quiet, mostly out of fear they might be next. This leads to another one of his brutal maxims. Men should either be well treated or crushed, because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries. Of more serious ones, they cannot.
Wow, that's cold. But you can see the ruthless logic. Minimize your potential enemies or make them completely powerless. And then he talks about the Romans as the model for expansion, right? What did they do so well?
The Romans, for Machiavelli, were masters of foresight. They were proactive. He uses this analogy of a hectic fever. You can cure it easily if you catch it early, but if you wait, it's fatal. The Romans diagnosed political problems early, their methods. They sent colonies, they kept friendly relations with weaker neighbors like the Achaeans, they actively worked to keep stronger powers like Macedon down, and crucially, they stopped other strong foreign powers from gaining influence where they didn't want them. They fought their wars far away, in Greece, specifically to avoid fighting them at home in Italy.
Always thinking ahead. dealing with potential threats before they become actual crises. That seems to be a running theme.
A major theme. He really slams the mindset of just enjoying the benefits of the time, saying it just delays problems, usually to someone else's advantage. The Romans, he insists, relied on their own valor and prudence to tackle challenges directly, on their terms.
Okay, but what about those places that were used to being free? Cities with their own laws, their own sense of independence before you conquered them. That sounds like a recipe for trouble.
It's definitely tricky. For these formerly free cities, Machiavelli lays out three stark options. No sugarcoating. Option 1, ruin them, destroy them completely. He points to Rome destroying Capua, Carthage. That's the safest way, he argues, because then they can never rebel. Option 2, the prince goes to live there himself, as we discussed. Direct control. Option 3, let them keep their own laws, pay you tribute, but install an oligarchy, a small ruling group loyal to you. This group knows they depend entirely on your support for their power.
So crush them, join them, or rule through puppets.
Yeah,
But he leans towards destruction, especially for republics, doesn't he?
he does. He says republics have more vitality, greater hatred, and more desire for vengeance because the memory of freedom is so strong it never lets them rest easy under a conqueror. So pragmatically, the surest way is to destroy them or to reside there. It's much easier, he notes, to hold on to states that are already used to being ruled by a prince. They're slower to take up arms. It's brutal, but it's central to his realism about power. It's about effectiveness, not kindness.
Okay, moving from acquiring states to the actual character of the prince. How does Machiavelli see the difference between getting power through your own ability versus just getting lucky or using someone else's army?
He's very clear on this. Relying on your own ability, what he calls virtue, which is more than just virtue, it's skill, capability, drive, that's the strongest foundation. He talks about figures like Moses, Cyrus, Romulus. Fortune might give them the opening, the opportunity, like chaos or a power vacuum, but it's their virtue, their personal ability and foresight that grabs that chance and shapes it into something lasting.
Right. Fortune knocks, but you build the house. He also talks about the danger for innovators, people trying to introduce new things. Why is that so risky?
Oh, extremely risky. Introducing a new order of things is one of the hardest, most uncertain things a ruler can do. Why? Because you immediately make enemies of everyone who benefited from the old system. And the people who might benefit from the new system, they're only lukewarm defenders. They're hesitant, partly because they fear the opposition, and partly just because people are naturally skeptical. They don't fully believe in new things until they've seen them work consistently over time.
And that leads straight to his famous point about armed versus unarmed prophets, right? Still relevant today.
Absolutely. His line is stark. All armed prophets have conquered, and the unarmed ones have been destroyed. Savonarola, again, is the prime example of the unarmed prophet. Huge following, but when belief faded and push came to shove, he had no force to compel obedience. Persuasion just isn't enough on its own. You need the credible threat of coercion.
A tough lesson about change. Good ideas aren't enough. You need power to back them up. What about those who get power just through luck or someone else's help?
Their rise might be easy, he says, but holding on to power is incredibly hard. They often lack the necessary skills, the knowledge gained through struggle. And crucially, they don't have forces loyal to them. Their power base is shallow, like a plant with no roots, easily knocked over when fortune shifts.
Easy come, easy go, because the foundation isn't solid. And he contrasts Francesco Sforza and Cesare Borgia here, doesn't he?
Yes, a great comparison. Sforza rose to be Duke of Milan through his own skill, proper means, and with great ability, and kept his state relatively easily. Cesare Borgia, on the other hand, got his state mainly because of his father, Pope Alexander VI, his fortune in arms. When his father's support vanished, Borgia, despite being very capable himself, struggled and ultimately lost it.
Ah, Cesare Borgia, often seen as the hero of the prince, even though he failed in the end. Why did Machiavelli admire his methods so much? What lessons are there?
Machiavelli saw Borgia's actions as a kind of masterclass, a set of precepts for a new prince. He acknowledges the ultimate failure, but blames it mostly on extraordinary and extreme malignity of fortune. Basically, terrible luck, plus Borgia getting seriously ill at the worst possible moment, rather than flawed strategy. In Machiavelli's eyes, Borgia laid incredibly strong foundations.
Okay, so what were those foundations? What specific things did Borgia do that Machiavelli thought were so brilliant, so worth copying?
Well, first, he systematically weakened his rivals. He cleverly lured key figures from the powerful Orsini and Colonnesi families in Rome over to his side with good pay and positions. This broke their old loyalties. Then came the infamous Sinigalia incident. Pure, calculated treachery. He invited the leaders of the rival factions, the Orsini and Vitelli, to a meeting supposedly for reconciliation. Then he trapped them and had them all killed. Ruthless, decisive, eliminated major threats in one go.
That Sinigalia story is telling. Just absolute cold-blooded betrayal. But it wasn't just about killing enemies, was it? He also worked on winning over the people.
That was crucial, yes. Take Romagna. It was a mess, ruled by weak, predatory lords. Borgia appointed this tough character, Romero d'Orco, known for being swift and cruel, to restore order. And Romero did, using harsh methods. But once peace was established, Borgia knew Romero himself had become hated. So what did he do? He had Romero publicly executed, his body cut in two and displayed in the piazza in Cesena. Machiavelli notes the spectacle left the people at once satisfied and dismayed. It brilliantly shifted all the blame for the cruelty onto Romero, made Borgia look like a bringer of justice, and won him popular support.
Wow. Use a cruel tool, then break it publicly to wash your hands of the cruelty and look good. That's some next-level reputation management. Political theater, indeed. Did Borgia plan for the long term, too?
Incredibly so. He had plans to wipe out the families of the lords he'd overthrown, win over the Roman nobility, pack the College of Cardinals so the next pope would be his man. His big goal was to become so powerful before his father died that he could withstand the initial shock, and he almost pulled it off. He'd achieved 3 out of 4 of these aims when Pope Alexander suddenly died.
So he thought of almost everything, except getting deathly ill himself right when his father died. That's the malignity of fortune you mentioned.
That was the killer blow, yes. But Machiavelli argues Borgia made one critical strategic error, even while sick. He allowed Julius II to become pope. Borgia still had enough clout to block cardinals he'd injured or who had reason to fear him, and Machiavelli's lesson here is vital. He who believes that new benefits will cause great personages to forget old injuries is deceived. Julius II had been wronged by Borgia, and he feared him. So naturally, Julius moved to destroy him. It shows the limits of planning against sheer bad luck and, crucially, against simmering resentment.
A powerful warning. Don't underestimate old grudges. Okay, moving on from strategy. Machiavelli also tackles the use of wickedness to gain power. He gives examples like Agathocles the Sicilian and Oliverado da Fermo. How do they fit in?
Agathocles clawed his way up from nothing to be king of Syracuse. Partly through military skill, yes, but also through incredible cruelty. He systematically massacred the Senate and the rich citizens to grab power, making himself beholden to no one. Machiavelli observes he gained an empire, sure, but not glory. His methods worked, but they weren't virtuous in the traditional sense.
Right, effectiveness isn't the same as traditional morality. And Oliverado, his story seems even more personal, betraying family trust.
Oliverado's story is chilling. He was raised and trained by his uncle. To seize power in his hometown, Fermo, he invited his uncle and the city's leading citizens to a feast, a trap. At his signal, his soldiers rushed in and killed them all. He then rode through the town, took control, and systematically killed all the malcontents who were able to injure him, secured his rule through sheer terror and elimination.
Brutal, just brutal. But Machiavelli then makes a really interesting distinction, doesn't he? About the proper use of cruelty. It's not just about being cruel, but how and when.
Precisely. This is key. If you have to inflict injuries, do it all at one time so that, being tasted less, they offend less. Get the nasty stuff over with quickly. Benefits, on the other hand, should be given out little by little so that the flavor of them may last longer. And crucially, a prince needs consistency. He ought to live amongst his people in such a way that no unexpected circumstances shall make him change. If you suddenly get harsh in a crisis, it's too late. If you suddenly get lenient, people will see it as weakness, forced by the situation, and it won't win you any real loyalty.
Be decisive with the bad stuff, consistent and gradual with the good. It's a fascinating psychological strategy. This connects to his idea of civil principalities rising to power, not through crime or conquest, but through the support of fellow citizens, either the people or the nobles. What's the dynamic there?
He talks about these 2 basic humors or forces in every city. The people who just want not to be bossed around and ripped off by the elites, and the nobles who want to do the bossing and ricking off. A principality can emerge when one side feels it needs a strong leader to achieve its goals, either the people elevating someone to protect them from the nobles, or the nobles picking someone to help them dominate the people.
And he clearly thinks it's better to be backed by the people than the nobles, right? Why is that foundation stronger?
Much stronger and safer. If the nobles put you in power, you're surrounded by people who consider themselves his equals. They're harder to manage, more likely to challenge you. But if the people raise you up, you stand alone, with few around you who aren't ready to obey. Your authority is clearer, less contested.
Because the people's goal is simpler, more righteous, as he puts it, just wanting fair treatment, whereas the nobles inherently want to oppress. And he challenges that old saying about building on the people being like building on mud.
Yeah, he pushes back hard against that proverb. He argues that for a prince with courage and resolution, one who keeps the people's spirits up, relying on the people is not like building on mud. That prince will never find himself deceived in them. He uses Nabis of Sparta as proof. Nabis, with popular support, held off pretty much all of Greece and Rome. He only really needed to worry about a few resentful nobles.
So popular support, managed well, is actually a rock-solid foundation. And the prince needs to make sure citizens always have need of the state and of him. That's clever. Fostering dependence creates loyalty. Okay, now for the really juicy stuff.
Yeah.
The qualities a prince should have, or seem to have. Praise and blame. This is where the controversy really ignites.
This is absolutely central and where he turns conventional morality on its head. He says, flat out, how one lives is so far distant from how one ought to live. A prince who wants to survive must know how to do wrong and to make use of it or not according to necessity. He even says that sometimes following what looks like virtue leads to ruin, while embracing what looks like vice actually brings security and prosperity.
That's a bombshell, isn't it? Forget being good, for goodness sake. It's about what works to keep the state intact, even if that means doing things society considers bad. Let's unpack some specific qualities. Liberality versus meanness. Generosity versus being stingy.
Conventionally, generosity is good, right? But Machiavelli argues that if you're truly liberal in a showy way, spending lavishly, you'll burn through your resources fast. Then you'll have to tax people heavily to keep it up. That makes you hated, odious, and eventually poor and despised. You end up achieving the opposite of what you intended.
So trying to be Mr. Nice Guy with money backfires spectacularly, which means being mean or maybe frugal, economical is actually the smarter play for a ruler.
Exactly. A prince known for being mean or careful with money can actually fund his defenses, undertake projects, without crushing his people with taxes. In the long run, this earns respect. He's seen as managing the state's wealth responsibly. He points to Pope Julius II, known for being liberal to get elected pope, but then very thrifty in funding his wars. And the King of Spain at the time was famously frugal too. It worked.
Better to be criticized a bit for being tight-fisted, as long as it doesn't breed hatred, than to try being generous and end up needing to be rapacious, which definitely breeds hatred. And if you are going to be generous, he says, use someone else's money.
Precisely. When it comes to distributing spoils of war plunder, loot, then a prince should be lavish with his soldiers. Keeps them loyal, motivated. Think Cyrus, Caesar, Alexander. That kind of liberality boosts your reputation without bankrupting your own treasury or alienating your own subjects.
Okay, next up, maybe the most famous Machiavellian dilemma of all. Cruelty versus clemency. Is it better to be feared or loved? What's his final word?
Well, ideally, he says you'd want to be both. Every prince should want to be seen as merciful, clement, but he warns, be careful not to misuse that mercy. If you have to choose between being feared and being loved, and you often do, then it is better to be feared than loved.
That's the line everyone remembers. Stark. Why is fear more reliable than love as a basis for power?
His reasoning is pretty cynical about human nature. Love, he says, is held together by a link of obligation which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. People are fickle, self-interested. Their loyalty based on affection can vanish quickly. Men also hesitate less to offend someone they love than someone they fear. Fear, however, is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. The concrete threat of consequences is simply a more dependable motivator than warm feelings.
But there's a crucial catch, isn't there? You can't just be cruel indiscriminately or you'll be hated, which is also dangerous.
Absolutely critical distinction. You must inspire fear, yes, but without generating hatred. And the key way to do that, keep your hands off your subjects' property and their women. That's the line you don't cross. If you have to execute someone, make sure there's a clear justification, a manifest cause. Because, as he chillingly notes, pretexts for taking away the property are never in short supply, but reasons for taking a life are harder to fabricate and fade faster. People, he implies, feel the loss of property more deeply, more permanently than almost anything else.
That feels disturbingly true even today. People might forgive violence if they see a reason, but mess with their money or family. Different story. Now, what about applying this to the military? A general has to be cruel sometimes. That sounds like a tough balancing act.
In a military context, especially with a diverse army, Machiavelli argues a reputation for cruelty is actually quite necessary for maintaining unity and discipline. He holds up Hannibal as the prime example. Hannibal's inhuman cruelty, combined with his incredible skill, made his army respect and fear him intensely. That fear kept his incredibly diverse forces united and effective. Contrast that with Scipio, whose too great forbearance led to indiscipline and rebellion among his troops in Spain. Scipio was even criticized in the Roman Senate for being too soft.
So for a commander, discipline enforced by fear trumps easygoing leadership. Okay, this leads to another really controversial bit, keeping faith, promises, the fox and the lion metaphor.
He starts by saying, sure, it's praiseworthy to keep your word, to live with integrity. Everyone agrees on that. But then he immediately pivots to reality. Experience shows, he says, that those princes who have done great things have held good faith of little account. They knew how to use craftiness, deception to get around people, and ultimately overcame those who just relied on honesty.
So results trump promises, the ends justify the means, essentially. And this fox and lion idea, how do they represent what a prince needs?
He says there are two ways to fight. By law, which is human, and by force, which is beastly. Since law often isn't enough, a prince must learn to use both the beast and the man. He mentions the old myth of Achilles being taught by Chiron, the centaur, half man, half beast, as a symbol of this. So the prince needs to be like the fox, clever enough to recognize traps and snares, and he needs to be like the lion, strong and fierce enough to frighten off the wolves, the enemies, cunning and strength.
A combination of brains and brawn, and this means explicitly breaking promises if it suits your interests.
Absolutely. A wise ruler cannot and should not keep his word when it works against him, or when the reasons he made the promise no longer apply. And don't worry, he adds dryly, nor will there ever be wanting to a prince legitimate reasons to excuse this non-observance. You can always find an excuse. He uses Pope Alexander VI again as the master of this. Alexander did nothing else but deceive men, and he always found victims. He knew how to manipulate people's expectations.
That's the part that really gets people the idea of the prince as a great pretender and dissembler. It's not about being good, it's about appearing good, a performance.
Exactly. Machiavelli states it boldly. It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. Even more, he says, having those qualities and always sticking to them can be harmful. Appearing to have them is what's useful. Seem merciful, faithful, humane, religious, upright. But crucially, keep your mind ready so that should you require not to be so, you may be able and know how to change to the opposite when preserving the state demands it.
It all comes down to perception. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. It sounds like a PR strategy for autocrats.
In a way, yes. Appearance is key because everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are. And those few who see through the act, they won't dare challenge the majority opinion, especially when the majesty of the state backs the prince. Ultimately, he concludes, people judge by results. If a prince wins and keeps his state secure, the means will always be considered honest and he will be praised. The vulgar, the masses, are swayed by appearances and outcomes.
A tough logic. Success sanitizes the methods. This links directly to avoiding hatred and contempt. If appearance is so important, how do you manage that? Especially since avoiding hatred is your best defense against plots.
Avoiding hatred and contempt is absolutely vital for security. Hatred comes mainly from being greedy, taking property, violating women. Contempt comes from seeming weak, fickle, frivolous, cowardly, indecisive. So avoid those things. Instead, project greatness, courage, seriousness, decisiveness. Make your judgment seem final and unshakable.
Sound strong, look decisive, and crucially, don't steal people's stuff and mess with their families. Solid advice across the ages, really. And conspiracies. Always a threat back then.
The best defense against conspiracies, he argues, is simply not being hated or despised by the general population. A conspirator banks on the idea that people will be happy to see the prince gone. But if the people actually like or respect the prince, the conspirator knows they'll face a backlash, and that fear usually stops them. He tells the story of Annibale Bentivogli in Bologna. After he was assassinated, the people were so enraged they rose up and killed the entire family of the conspirators. Shows the power of popular goodwill as a shield.
Wow. The people as the ultimate bodyguard. He also uses Roman emperors as case studies for managing different groups, the people versus the soldiers. That sounds like a nightmare.
It was a unique challenge for them. The people generally wanted peace, while the soldiers were often aggressive, greedy, wanting war and plunder. Emperors caught between these demands often ended badly if they couldn't command respect from both. Marcus Aurelius managed it because he inherited the throne and was genuinely virtuous, respected by all. But Pertinax, who tried to rein in the soldiers, was hated by them and despised for seeming weak, so he didn't last long. Alexander Severus, though good, was seen as too influenced by his mother, effeminate, and was despised.
But then there was Severus. He seemed to nail that balancing act. How did he pull it off?
Severus is Machiavelli's prime example of someone who was both a most valiant lion and a most cunning fox. He played his rivals off against each other, crushed them ruthlessly. Critically, he kept the soldiers intensely loyal because he let them enrich themselves at the empire's expense. His sheer military ability and fearsome reputation basically shielded him from the people's hatred, even though he oppressed them to please the army. He masterfully combined necessary virtues and vices for statecraft.
So his incredible competence and fearsome image allowed him to satisfy the army without completely losing the people. It's all about adapting, isn't it? And he connects this to his own time, surprisingly.
Yeah, he makes an interesting point. He says princes in his day actually had it easier with soldiers than the Romans did because armies weren't these huge permanent fixtures controlling provinces anymore. So for most rulers now, meaning the 16th century, but it resonates, it is now more necessary to satisfy the people rather than the soldiers because the people are the more powerful. Public opinion mattered more, unless you were the Ottoman Sultan or the Sultan of Egypt, whose states basically were their armies.
That connection to popular power feels very modern. Okay, let's shift to what Machiavelli calls the prince's soul study, warfare. He says good laws and good arms are the foundation, but he clearly prioritizes one.
He says it very directly, good laws and good arms. And as there cannot be good laws where the state is not well armed, it follows that where they are well armed, they have good laws. Then he just says, okay, enough about laws, let's talk about arms. His focus is crystal clear.
Force enables law. That's the message. And he absolutely despises mercenaries and auxiliaries, doesn't he? Why are they so bad in his view?
He calls mercenaries useless and dangerous. He paints them as disloyal, undisciplined, cowardly, only fighting for money. When things get tough, they run or desert. He blames Italy's constant problems being invaded and pushed around by France, Spain, the Swiss, directly on its reliance on mercenary armies. He even says their whole way of fighting was designed to avoid risk and hardship for them, not to win wars effectively for their employers. This led to Italy's slavery and contempt.
So they had zero skin in the game, just collecting a paycheck. A fundamental conflict of interest. What about auxiliaries, troops borrowed from another ruler? Are they any better?
Even worse, according to Machiavelli. Auxiliaries are always disadvantageous. Why? If you lose with them, you're ruined. If you win with them, you essentially become their prisoner. You're now indebted to, and possibly dependent on, the power that lent you the troops. He points to Pope Julius II needing Spanish help against Ferrara, then finding himself at their mercy, and the Florentines using French troops to attack Pisa, finding the French more dangerous than the Pisans. The ultimate cautionary tale. The Byzantine emperor letting Turkish troops into Greece, who then basically took the place over.
Heads you lose, tails you lose. Relying on outsiders is a trap either way, so the only real answer is one's own arms, raising your own army, loyal to you.
Absolutely, that's fundamental. A prince gains the most respect when everyone saw that he was complete master of his own forces. He brings up Caesar Borgia again. Borgia tried auxiliaries, then mercenaries, found both unreliable, and finally relied on his own men. That's when his reputation soared. Hiero of Syracuse is another example. He realized his mercenaries were useless and treacherous, so he wiped them out and built his own loyal army.
It's about self-reliance, real independence for the state. And what about the prince's personal role in war? It's not just about having an army. The prince himself needs to be deeply involved, right?
It's everything. The art of war, he says, is the sole art that belongs to him who rules. Neglect it and you lose your state. Master it and you gain and secure states. He contrasts Francesco Sforza, the skilled warrior who became duke, with Sforza's sons who avoided military hardship and promptly lost the duchy. An unarmed prince's despise, can't trust his soldiers, can't command respect.
So it's a full-time job, not a side interest. Constant learning and practice, even in peacetime.
Especially in peacetime. A prince must train even harder when there's no war. Physically, keep fit, but also mentally. Study the geography of your lands, mountains, valleys, rivers. Know it intimately. This helps in planning campaigns, choosing campsites, surprising the enemy, and intellectually. Read histories and study there the actions of illustrious men. learn from past successes and failures. He gives this amazing example of Philopoemen, a Greek leader, who, even just out walking with friends, would constantly pose tactical problems. If the enemy were on that hill and we were here, who would have the advantage? How could we attack? He never stopped thinking like a general.
That's incredible dedication. Always strategizing, always preparing, relentlessly proactive. Now, even the best general, the most prepared prince, has to deal with fortune, luck. How does Machiavelli square free will with the power of fortune?
He tackles this head on. He estimates that fortune controls maybe half of our actions, but crucially, she leaves the other half, or a little less, to be governed by ourselves. So we're not just puppets, but we're definitely not fully in control either.
Okay, so it's about a 50-50 split, roughly. And he uses that famous river analogy for fortune, doesn't he?
Yes, a very powerful image. Fortune is like a raging river in flood. It sweeps everything away, destroys buildings, changes the land. It seems unstoppable. But, he argues, when the river is calm, people can build defenses, dams, embankments to contain future floods. Fortune shows her power most, he says, where valor has not prepared to resist her. If Italy had built proper defenses, like Germany or France, it wouldn't have been so devastated by invasions.
So you can't stop the flood entirely, maybe, but you can prepare for it. Prudence and preparation can mitigate fortune's damage. And then there's the idea of adapting your actions to the times. That sounds crucial but difficult.
Hugely important and hugely difficult. Success often depends on whether your way of acting matches the spirit of the times. The real challenge is being flexible enough to know how to accommodate himself to the change, even if your natural personality or past successes push you in a different direction. People get stuck in their ways, especially if a certain approach worked before. They find it incredibly hard to change, even when the situation demands it.
And he uses Pope Julius II, again here, the impetuous pope, who always charged ahead and somehow succeeded.
Right. Julius always acted boldly, impetuously, and it worked brilliantly for him because the circumstances at that time suited that approach. Machiavelli shrewdly notes, though, that Julius's shortness of life did not let him experience the contrary. If the times had changed and demanded caution, Julius's stubborn nature probably would have ruined him. And then Machiavelli throws in that provocative line, "Fortune is always, womanlike, a lover of young men, because they are less cautious, more violent, and with more audacity command her."
Boldness attracts fortune, especially youthful boldness. It's almost mythical. To pull all this together, Machiavelli gives us a detailed case study. Castruccio Castracani of Lucca. Tell us about this practical prince.
Castruccio is presented as the living embodiment of Machiavelli's principles, a man who wasn't born into power but rose to rule Lucca and Pisa through sheer valor and fortune. A self-made man in the Renaissance sense.
How did he start out? What showed his early promise?
He had obscure origins, adopted by a priest, but he hated religious studies, loved playing with weapons from a young age. A local commander, Messer Francesco Guinigi, spotted his talent and natural authority, took him in. Castruccio quickly excelled, great horseman, skilled fighter, but also had this delightful modesty that won people over. A potent combination.
Natural talent plus savvy self-presentation. How did he translate that into actual power?
His military reputation grew. He became guardian to Guinigi's son, which gave him influence. Then, classic Machiavelli, he allied with an outside power, Uguccione, to violently crush his rivals, the Opizzi family, in Lucca. Decisive elimination of enemies. After that, he used a mix of political maneuvering and popular support to get himself elected Lord of Lucca. Later, he leveraged an imperial decree to become Lord of Pisa too. A very calculated climb.
Okay, so smart alliances, ruthless action against rivals, political skill. What about his military brilliance? The battles sound impressive.
Take the Battle of Montecchini. Castruccio noticed the Florentines put their best troops in the center, weakest on the flanks. He did the opposite, strongest on his flanks. When they clashed, his strong flanks rolled up their weak ones. The Florentine center barely got involved, and it was a huge rout. Massive Florentine losses, very few for him. Pure tactical genius.
Brilliant, exploiting the enemy's formation. And he used that injuries all at one time idea too, didn't he? With the Poggio family.
Textbook example. The Poggi family rebelled. Castruccio pretended to offer them mercy if they surrendered. They did. He immediately imprisoned and executed them all. Swift, decisive, no lingering threat. And then, to really hammer the point home, he built a fortress in Lucca, using stones taken from the towers of the families he'd killed or exiled. A very visible, grim symbol of his power.
That fortress is chilling, a constant reminder. And the Pistoia affair sounds like pure fox territory, total deception.
Oh, absolutely cunning. Pistoia was split between two factions, Bianchi and Neri. Both secretly asked Castruccio for help against the other. He promised help to both. He sent troops in through one gate, supposedly helping one side, while he entered through the other gate, supposedly helping the other side. Once inside, at his signal, his men killed the leaders of both factions and seized the city. Masterful manipulation.
Playing both sides against the middle, then taking it all. Truly the fox. In the Battle of Serravalle. Another win against the odds.
Another strategic masterpiece. He lured a much larger Florentine army into a narrow mountain pass. He secretly captured a key castle overlooking the pass the night before. Then he attacked them head-on, while sending another force around via the castle to hit their flank. Trapped, attacked from two sides, the Florentines were crushed again. Huge losses for them, minimal for him.
Incredible consistency. Always using terrain, timing, surprise, cunning over just numbers. Machiavelli also shares some of Castruccio's sayings and personality traits that fit his model. Any examples?
Yeah, some great ones. Criticized for spending lavishly on a bird, he retorted, "A ducat is much less to me," showing his different sense of value. When someone flattered him excessively, he apparently rewarded them, recognizing the game of power. He wisely said, "He who is considered wise by day will not be considered a fool at night," hinting at that necessary public versus private persona.
And that absolutely ruthless one. When asked why he killed an old friend who'd helped him rise, he just said he had only killed a new enemy.
Oof, yes. That really sums up the cold pragmatism. Personal loyalty means nothing compared to state security. Interestingly, he also kept the actual chains from when he had been imprisoned earlier in his life, displayed them as memorials of his bad fortune, a constant reminder of adversity and the turns of fate.
So Castruccio really lived these principles.
Yeah.
But he died young, and his successor couldn't hold it together.
Exactly. He caught a chill after a victory, died suddenly right at the peak of his success. Fortune's final, unpredictable move. On his deathbed, he apparently advised his heir, Pagolo Guinigi, to perhaps aim for a smaller, safer state and focus on peace. But Pagolo lacked Castruccio's virtue, his ability. He quickly lost most of the territory. It just reinforces Machiavelli's point. You need the skill, the ruthlessness. Inheritance isn't enough.
The ability has to be there, constantly applied. What a life story. Okay, wrapping up our deep dive into the Prince, what's the main takeaway you think our listeners should hold on to?
I think the main thing is that Machiavelli's lessons, harsh as they sound, cynical, ruthless, even immoral to some, they came from a deep, pragmatic look at how things really worked in his world, a world where state survival was everything. He wasn't trying to write a guide to being nice. He was trying to offer truths that can be proved at every turn, about gaining and holding power in a dangerous reality. It's like a mirror reflecting the often ugly mechanics of politics.
And it's shocking how relevant those mechanics still feel. You see these dynamics playing out constantly in politics, sure, but also in boardrooms, organizations, maybe even personal lives that focus on self-interest, on perception versus reality, on using both strength and cunning. It's still here. It makes you really question what effective leadership actually requires, even if the answers are uncomfortable.
It absolutely does. It's a book that doesn't just tell you things, it forces you to wrestle with them.
So the final thought. If modern government aims to be a living moral force, how does that square with Machiavelli's pragmatism? Would he say true morality is just preserving the state by any means? Or maybe, are we still, like he suggested people were back then, dupes of our simplicity and greed, easily fooled by appearances, making his warnings as urgent as ever?
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Maybe the best way to end is with the lines from Petrarch that Machiavelli himself used at the very end of The Prince. It's a call to action for Italy, but maybe it speaks more broadly too.
Virtue against fury shall advance the fight, and it's in the combat soon shall put to flight, and it in the combat soon shall put to flight, and it in the combat soon shall put to flight, nor in the Italian's breasts extinguished.
A powerful note to end on. A call for courage echoing down the centuries.
What a fascinating, if challenging, deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We hope this exploration of the Prince has given you plenty to think about. Until next time, keep digging deeper.